policy analyst. Can you help me with my, not resume though, or can you help me with my resume actually, or can you help me, do something or do that? But guys, I have a guest today in the building. I have Larry. Yeah, Larry is a certified policy analyst with the British Columbia Public Service government in Canada. So Larry I'm going to give Larry, some time to talk about what he does as a policy analyst, and also a few things you need to take home if you're looking at becoming a policy analyst. And some of the tips we'll be giving you today, you can also use it if you're trying to apply for another type of job, especially outside the country, outside like in Canada, US, wherever you are. You can use the same resume advice or preparing for an interview advice for your job application. So guys, I'm just going to switch over to Larry. Larry, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Flo.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the first question, which is, so tell us about what a policy analyst is, and like people just hear policy analyst. What is it, and what do they really do?
Thank you. That's an interesting question, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege to come and share in your channel. So I like to keep things simple because as a policy analyst as well, we're very, very coincides in how we communicate and how we write. So I would break it down just for the viewer so that you understand what policy analysts do. So we have to understand policy in itself, first of all. So policy can be as simple as saying it's a law, it's a guideline, it's a principle, it's a course of action that could be given to anybody by any entity. But most times, policy analysis is usually like associated with the government. That's why most policy analysts you see would be in the government. But policies can range from laws, simple rules, simple guidelines. So organizations could have policy analysts as well, right? So it's just not the government. But now that you know what the policy is, we now have to understand what the policy analyst does. So
just sorry to cut you short. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about policy, and I'm thinking, okay, do I have to be like a lawyer to be like a policy analyst? So what exactly do you do in the job as a policy analyst?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So policy analysts are in the back end, basically. So the end goal is a policy. But what do we have to do to make sure that this policy becomes fulfilled, becomes a fruition? That's what policy analyst does. So what we do is, most times, you analyze events, you analyze existing policies. Sometimes it could be new policies where you have to come up with something that the government has to do. But to come up with that means you have to first seek out information. That in line goes into like your research skills. So you have to like be able to find information. How do you find information? You have to be able to research that information. So you are helping the government to make policy decisions as a policy analyst. So it's in 3 phases. Most times, we all know now that the end goal is having a policy, right? But what comes into having that policy? First of all, as a policy analyst, you look for information. When you get that information, you analyze that information. So information seeking, analyzing information that you've received or you found. When you analyze information, you're analyzing information because you want to come to a conclusion using that information. Then that goes into making a decision, right? But because as a policy analyst, you can't make that decision. You can only suggest those decisions. So based on the findings you've done, based on the analysis you've done, you come up with, I've analyzed this. This is the options that we can go with.
Like a recommendation.
Exactly. Okay. So you take that to the appropriate, it could be the minister, if it's a government, it could be your direct supervisor, it could be an executive director, whoever is in charge of making that decision. Wow. So you are basically helping them to make that decision. So once that decision is made and they follow whatever guidelines you've given them, it then becomes a policy. Then after that, after it becomes a policy, then there's the job of implementing the policy. So it comes back to you. So you've analyzed this information and you've said this is what you should do. The minister or whoever should make the decision have made that decision. They then come back and say, okay, now implement this policy. So implementing a policy is another ballgame in itself. It depends on the kind of policy you're working on.
Okay.
Right? So implementing a policy could be, and that's why as a policy analyst, you have to be very dynamic in your skills. To implement, now, you came up with this policy. You have to convince people that this policy makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right? You have to explain this policy to people in as simple as terms as possible. Because then you're trying to roll out this policy. You have to explain it to them. Then that brings you into having presentation skills. So that you can explain that policy. Right?
Yeah.
And then brings you to having writing skills. When you write that policy, people can read it and understand that policy.
Okay. Sorry. Just kind of like you're already talking about the skills you need.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
But can I become a policy analyst with no experience?